like to have the staff bring to us some information in the future, obviously in the early part of next year, where we can weigh the pros and cons of being a member of the cable franchise. Because I think that there would be some actual very big advantages to the city to leave the cable franchise. We could probably make more money and do a better job. And so I would ask the staff to gather some information so that we can have a discussion about that next year.
Maplewood is the big dog in that cable commission.
At the cable commission level is that they take a great deal of money through paying fees. And myself and several other people from the other other franchise members feel that we should be doing a better job getting more of that money back to our respective cities. Put this on. They feel we should be doing a better job getting the money back to our respective cities when we set the budget.
With her this past fall, late fall, is the issue of unresponsiveness on the part of the Cable Commission to complaints, and some pretty, I'll clean it up, sad excuses for local access programming.
Welcome to Off the Record News. I'm your host, Diana Longry. Thank you for tuning in. Off the Record News is brought to you live from the SCC studios out of White Bear Lake. Tonight, it's April 3rd, 2013. As I mentioned, our program is live, so I encourage you to call in with any questions or comments that you may have on our topic this evening. Now, before we get started with our topic this evening, public access under attack, I want to give you an update on a program that we had a couple of weeks ago. The program was entitled Patriot Act, Free Speech Criminalized. Well, I want to give you an update on that program because it's been very successful. We have uploaded the program to YouTube, which many of our programs are on YouTube, and that program has now hit over 1,700 views, and that's quite an accomplishment for an hour show. And as a result, also, my guest has indicated to me that as a result of that interview and that show, she's been invited to go to a conference in Syria. This program has made a difference, not just here in our community, but it's making a difference throughout the nation and possibly even in another country. Public access TV, especially for those people who live in Maplewood, I believe is under attack. Now, back in January, we had our program was Public Access Under Attack #1. Because at that time, the Maplewood City Council and top administrators were talking about the potential for pulling out of the Joint Powers Agreement and not being part of the Cable Commission here in our area. And why did they want to do that? Well, some of the reasons were, and I'm paraphrasing a lot of what was talked about in that first program and the clips that we showed. One was because they felt that they could do a better job of using the airwaves. Number two, they would be able to use the money better because they had ideas on how they could use the money that would be coming to them as a city rather than having to share it with other cities in the Cable Commission. And as a result of that show, they've changed some of their approach, and yet much of their approach is very similar to what was attempted by Maplewood many years ago. It's almost like, well, deja vu. And I have looked through my archives to find some of that film footage so that you, the viewer, can take a look at what happened back in 2004, 2005, and hear what was said back then, and then compare it with what you're hearing today. And I'll let you decide what you believe is going on. Is it the same thing, or is it something different? Personally, I think it's the same. It's kind of like one of those retread tires. You know, you just, it's a tire, you have to put a new tread on it and see if you can make it go a few miles further. But let's get started first with setting this up, because you see Maplewood just recently had a workshop to talk about this issue about their being in the Cable Commission. But they changed it a little bit in that now they're talking about, well, that there's some complaints that were filed and that they feel that their complaints are not being taken seriously enough. And so now they're backing off from what they originally said, that they were thinking that they just pull out because they can use the money and they could do a better job. Now they're backing it up a bit so that they can frame the issue a little bit differently and not be so bold about just simply withdrawing. They're trying to set the stage instead to say, well, because we weren't taken care of, well, then we will take our ball and play elsewhere. Now, our first few clips are from the workshop of March 25th, and this first clip is of the city manager, Mr. Antonin of Maplewood, of setting out the issue as he sees it. Let's take a look.
As you may know, we have received several complaints on one particular program, and we followed through on that, and that, in my opinion, met with little success from the Cable Commission or perhaps our representative in resolving this matter. The question is simply not so much freedom of speech, but what are community standards for the use of
How do you like that line? It's not about freedom of speech, it's about community standards. However, the mission of public access is grounded in the First Amendment right and free speech. That is part of the mission here at Public Access TV. But let's continue on and listen to the rest of what he has to say.
And in my opinion, we are poorly served by at least one of these programs in that regard, that I have not been able to determine what the community standards are for this. Therefore, as I mentioned in my memo, there are several examples I see as certainly hate speech that have been perpetrated by some people, certainly in bad taste, if it doesn't meet the threshold of that. So the discussion is basically what the council wants to do about it. I outlined several options. The first would be to do nothing. The second would be for the council to ask the Cable Commission to review and determine what are appropriate community standards to be viewed on the public access channels. And the third is to perhaps consider other sources for the uses of Maplewood's PEG and franchise fees. I'll be happy to answer any detailed questions.
So you see, they did get it in there about, is there a different use that we can put those franchise and PEG fees to? Well, of course, later on in the program, you'll hear what the big idea is that Maplewood has, and they kind of slip it in. But we'll leave that to a little bit later in the program. But you heard how he was talking about community standards. Now, if you take a look, and I'm not an intellectual property attorney, so I don't know all the details of what is defined as hate speech or what is defined as community standards, but I do know that there are U.S. Supreme Court cases on all of these aspects of speech. Now, there is also another type of speech that's called fighting words, which is something that is not protected under the Constitution, but again, it's very specifically defined. It's not just words that are thrown out there to sound like you know what you're talking about. And when you're talking about community standards, from the little research that I've done, there's some very specific cases, especially from 1973, and I believe it's the Miller versus California case, that is mostly about, when they talk about community standards, they're mostly talking about obscenity and profanity, and whether or not that that's the the community standard of how maybe somebody uses various words in their community, and or whether or not maybe it might even have to do with obscenity such as nudity and other kinds of pornographic activity. Now, none of that is anything that's been complained about here at SCC on these channels, not that I'm aware of, because Mr. Antonin did include the one complaint that was made to the SCC studios here, and that complaint contained none of those issues. It didn't talk about there being nudity, profanity, swearing, none of that. And but he also doesn't talk about specifics as to what it was that is complained about, nor did he show, from what I can understand, did he show snippets of that show that was complained about to be able to identify to the council members exactly what the offending content was. Now, I think it would be important for him to have done that before this meeting, for the council to even have a meaningful discussion on this topic. Why? Because it's my understanding, Miss Kathy Juniman, that she does not have cable access, because for years she has proudly proclaimed that she doesn't have email access other than the one that she has at City Hall, that the city staff people, they print it out for her. But that she doesn't have cable. Now, maybe that has changed, and maybe she does have access now to public access TV. But it was my understanding that in the past she has not. Now, during the meeting, Rebecca Cave, I don't believe she ever saw the show that was being complained about, because she too asked, well, what was the content that was being complained about? And I do think, though, that perhaps Marv Copen had seen the program, because I think he's the one who actually complained to City Manager Antonin, and then City Manager Antonin, rather than him actually filling out a complaint form, he had our Maplewood Commissioner fill out the form for him. See, and that's typically not really the way it would work. The way it would work is that the person who has the complaint would get the form online, and then they specifically fill out that complaint because they have that personal knowledge. And then they bring it forward, and then it is reviewed. Now, I understand that we do have a caller on the line. Caller, thank you for calling in. We have a lot of video that we're going to get to as well.
Mayor Longley, thank you very much for being such a freedom fighter for free speech. You're a real patriot to be such a fighting for free speech, so people can have the opinion. Am I correct that when Mr. Antonin, City Manager of Maplewood, makes charges that somebody is violating community standards, is it essentially that he doesn't like the opinion they share on some of the ways that he's operating the Maplewood government? And the other question I have, it sounds like you can make anonymous complaints to the Cable Commission or to the City Manager of Maplewood. I actually thought there was a policy that if you didn't like something that the City of Maplewood was putting on, or that the public access was putting on, or the government access was putting on, you were required to put your complaint in writing and sign your complaint for transparency and just part of the rules. I was under the impression that there were very clear-cut processes and rules, to make a complaint, and yet nobody has any names, nobody has any details. Is there something missing there? Thank you.
Well, thank you for bringing that up. And yes, it's my understanding that there is a very clear-cut process that if a viewer of our public channels here has a complaint, that they fill out a complaint and then they submit it to the appropriate person here at the SCC studios that reviews the content, the program, and looks into it to determine whether or not if it has violated any of the rules that we have here. Because every producer that has a program on our channels here has to sign a form that says what the rules are and that they will abide and comply with those rules. And it's my understanding that the program that was being complained of, not this one, but this one could be next, but not this one. But the one that was being complained of actually was found not to be in violation of the rules that the producer signed with their agreement. Now, let's get on to the next clip that we have and listen a little bit more into Maplewood's idea.
Are we taking this as, unfortunately, hearsay, that it was said without viewing a copy of it? Or did we view a copy? Did you see a copy of it?
I did see a copy of it because there have been more than several complaints made to me over the past few years in regard to this, and so I have been viewing this one particular program, and that's where I indicated I believe that
more than several complaints, but he doesn't say whether or not if they're all coming from the same person. Now, saying it that way, more than several complaints, makes it sound like, well, implies that there's many people who have complained. And yet, further on in the workshop, somebody says, well, there's really only about 10 people probably watching that show anyway. Well, then that would mean all 10 people, maybe all 10 people complained. I don't think that that's practical. I think that's disingenuous. But there is, as the caller indicated, it doesn't seem like there's any specifics, because later on a citizen did go up after the workshop and ask for copies of all the complaints, and they were told basically that, well, you know what, they can't have copies of those complaints because that's all private. So let's continue on.
That community standards are not being met, and it appears that community standards, there are no community standards for public access. I do know that if somebody brings in a glass of water or a can of pop to the control room, that they can be disciplined, but yet you can call people names, deface pictures, have whatnot, and there apparently are no remediation of that type of conduct.
Mm-hmm. However, I think on the other hand, if you were to look at those items that he was talking about, you probably would find that there are political cartoons, that there's political speech, and that, of course, is protected under the Constitution. So it's all in the way that you use your words and how you frame the issue. And I find it fascinating that he talks about the fact that one cannot bring any water or beverages into the control room. You could get disciplined for that. However, the entire part of the rule is that if you do bring your beverages into the control room, you have to leave them in the basket by the door, and as long as your beverage is in the basket by the door, you're okay. So you see, there is more to that rule. So let's continue on.
Free speech, I'm talking about the appropriate community standards that the Cable Commission should take this under consideration, and if they don't come up with some type of community standards, particularly in regard to as a Comcast subscriber, this is on my nickel.
Well, I know that there's a, you know, if you don't want to watch the programming, you just turn off the channel or you turn it to another channel. But now let's take a look, after you've heard this now, let's take a look at some of the issues that our Maplewood Cable Commissioner had to address to the council back in May of 2004, because you see, this issue came up in 2004 when Maplewood City Council members and administration wanted to control free speech on programs here on public access TV. So they were putting pressure on the Cable Commission to change their policies, and in doing so, of course, they made our Cable Commissioner the person who had to be the go-between between the City Council, who had an agenda, and the Cable Commission, which had their commitment to free speech. So let's listen to some of these clips. I've got about 4 clips from 2004. Let's take a look at this first one. Our Cable Commissioner from Maplewood is Kim Facile. She was back then in 2004. She is today. So she has a wealth of history in understanding and knowing exactly what the Cable Commission, what their mission is, and also what the antics of Maplewood has been in the past. Let's take a look.
This has been a very interesting issue that has been brought before the Commission, and the Commission was actually directed the Channel 15 Committee, which I sit on, to look at this. And I guess in essence, there were concerns that, there were concerns that there was some programming on Channel 15, in particular, that were produced by the public that weren't accurate and cast a negative light on, in particular, members of the city. And it was a concern that this was having an impact on the reputation and the credibility of the city and its ability to do its business in the community. And so we were directed particularly at looking at the issue of defamation. And so in our committee meetings, which started in probably November, we talked about some of the various ways that defamation could be addressed. What was it? First of all, we needed to understand what is defamation, and because that was the actual wording that we were asked to look into. And defamation is a very legal term, and it has some very specific a bar of proof, and especially if it has to do with public officials or city employees. What do you have to prove? One was malice, one was that it was on its face untrue, and one that needed to be proved is that it affected the person's reputation and their ability to continue doing their job. And it has been well tested in the courts that there are particular hurdles that need to be proven before you can say defamation has occurred.
So there is the framework of which the Cable Commission and the Channel 15 Committee had to look at the issue that was brought to the Cable Commission by the City of Maplewood. Now, the council members on the council at that time included Kathy Juneman, who happens to be on the council now, Marv Copen, who happens to be on the council now, Bob Cardinal, he too happens to be on the council now. Let's see here. Gee whiz, Will Rossbach, he's on the council now and back in 2004. You know, it's amazing. The only council member who's not on the council now, that was on the council back in 2004, is Jackie Monahan-Junick. So you see, you've got 4 council members that have been through all of this before. They were the initiators of this before. And now, with the help of Mr. Antonin, They are the initiators of this once again. But because they learned a little bit from the last time around that they can't really frame it in the cloak of libel and slander, they've come up with a little bit different spin. Let's talk about community standards instead. So let's continue on and look at the next clip.
We were given 3 options. One was our current, we actually documented what our current policy is, which had to do, it was more of an administrative process as it is, as this option 4 was. But we were actually only given 3 options by our attorney. One was the current mode, which someone presents a complaint, and then the attorney for the Cable Commission and the Executive Committee and the Commission itself have the option of how to handle that. So they make the decision internally, kind of like an administrative process. The second option was to turn it over to an administrative law judge, which would be more on the lines of mediation or arbitration, and that would take it out of the potential bias of the Commission and anyone else that might have been affected internal to the Commission.
Now, of course, in order to come up with all these options, the Cable Commission's attorney, Mike Bradley, he, of course, had to come up and formulate different options. And that costs the Cable Commission money to be hiring their attorney to be coming up with all these different kinds of options in order to propose them to Maplewood in an effort to solve their problem. Well, you see, I believe that that's exactly what's going to come up again now that they're proposing and coming forward to the Cable Commission and saying, we want you to establish community standards for public access TV. So you see, that is going to be what's going to happen next, is that they will be sending a letter to the Cable Commission asking for these community standards to be set. And so then the Cable Commission will have to expend legal fees in order to answer Maplewood's question about community standards. Let's continue on.
I asked for the city to come to me with something in writing that more closely reflected what kind of policy you would like to see enacted by the Commission regarding defamation. Didn't get anything in writing, so it became kind of frustrating situation for me because I didn't have any.
So, of course, the reason, of course, it's hard to put the kind of policy that they want in writing is because it would show exactly what their motivations would be. Because I believe that the policy that they wanted in place was simply to say, if we say that such and such a show is not appreciated by the Maplewood elected officials and the administration, that you will just simply take them off the air. That is the policy that I believe that back in 2004 that they wanted. They wanted it in such a way that the elected officials could say, we find this program to be offensive, so therefore, because we've said so, you will take it off. Well, of course, it's very difficult to put that policy in writing because certainly they know that that policy would not hold water. So instead, they wrote down no policy. And in place of that, then the commissioner, in order to be able to, to keep open communication with the council members that have appointed her, she did what she could do to try to propose some kind of a compromise, maybe a policy that would appease Maplewood and might be agreeable to the Cable Commission as well. She's in between a rock and a hard place, in other words. So let's take a look at what kind of a plan, an idea that she tried to come up with the best she could.
Anything to go back to my committee with. I didn't have anything to go to the full commission with because they can't vote on an idea because we're talking about a policy change. We need to have something in writing that is implementable and can be discussed and argued over and what have you. So I decided to draft this option 4, which essentially says we'll have a peer review board that you could bring a complaint to, and the peer review board could be made up of any number of combinations of people, but I included other public access producers, staff people, and a member of the commission. And that option I submitted for consideration and feedback to the city. So I hadn't actually gotten anything in writing other than an email saying this meets the, this is an acceptable alternative. But and so based on that, after the next commission meeting in January, we sat down with the attorney and we talked over some of the potential issues. Since it hadn't really been brought before the committee, it hadn't really been discussed in any length because I needed some feedback from the city, we finally did talk about it. And there were a lot of issues that surfaced in that conversation. One of them was I guess the potential liability of the members that would be on an ad hoc committee like that. Would a public access producer want to take on that responsibility of making a determination that someone has committed a defamatory act? Are they trained enough to be able to make that determination? And that was a big issue. And so, you know, after that, I did bring it up again at the next committee meeting, which was about 2 weeks ago. And the committee has changed since January 1, and we have new members, and it represents nearly half of the member cities of the franchise. So I got a pretty good feel for the attitude of the other cities about this particular option. And even as city council people, which in a couple of cases they sit on other city councils in our franchise, they did not feel that they had enough legal background to be able to make a ruling on something that is essentially a legal issue.
Essentially a legal issue. Now, it's my understanding that Mr. Antonin, at a previous city where he was city manager, this issue about being unhappy about what was being expressed on public access TV came up there as well, and that they formed some kind of little advisory peer group review group of some sort, and that after he left being city manager of that city, that committee or group was actually dissolved and went away. It was only created because Mr. Antonin needed to have it created, and once he left that community, the little committee, well, it dissolved. And so is that something that they're looking to try to bring here to SCC, to Maplewood, to look at ways to squelch free speech? I don't know. It certainly looks to me, though, like they want to determine what the community standards are by their ruler. Let's continue on.
Questions about option 4. The liability of the members is one, and then the extent to which there would be legal advice and what would be the role of the commission attorney in a hearing like that. Based on conversations, it sounds like the attorney would have to be there, if not presiding, or he would at least have to be advising how the motions and the hearing is proceeding. So it doesn't represent a $0 cost to the commission, because of course we pay him by the hour, and something like this is an open-ended issue. And the question is, along with options 1 and 2, there was discovery, there was, which, you know, you have to pull the evidence, and I guess the question is, if it's defamation, then it's defamation, and we have to go through all of the processes to determine that defamation has occurred.
If it's defamation, it's a legal process. Why would the Cable Commission reestablish a legal process, when the legal process that is available to somebody who feels that they've been wronged is indeed the district court. But you heard how the Cable Commission would have to expend all kinds of time, money, and energy to be able to afford due process and legal process to those particular producers that were under attack. Now, why create this? Well, in my mind, I see it's a way to shift the financial burden of talking about and going after somebody who you feel has wronged you. Now, if a council person feels that they have been defamed or there's been slander, you know, they can go to the district court system, but they will have to spend their own $320 for the filing fee. They will probably have to hire their own attorney rather than using the Cable Commission's attorney. They will have to go through their own discovery process, which of course could be thousands of dollars. But you see, this is a way to shift the financial cost burdens from those particular city council members who don't like what's being said on public access TV over to the Cable Commission and asking them to be the police dogs for the unhappy city council members. So let's continue on.
Then option 3 is fine. If the issue is something other than defamation, I guess that's what I'm getting at. And that's what I haven't been really clear about, because if the issue is defamation, we should be satisfied with a legal determination that defamation has occurred. If the issue is something other than defamation, then I need to determine what is the other issue and what other policy will address that issue in the best way and get the desired outcome. And that's my real question for the City Council, is what is the issue?
So you see, that question that was asked back in 2004 is entirely relevant today. Maplewood City Council, what is the issue? Well, now they're trying to pretend it's community standards. So now let's take a look then, as this issue percolated. Then finally, the Channel 5 15 Committee had a meeting in 2005. And we've got 2 clips from that. And the first one is talking about then this final proposal, the one that Maplewood was most happy with, and talking about what it would mean to the Cable Commission. Let's take a look.
Concerns were that there were slanderous statements they felt that had been made on Channel 15 Public Access, and they were they had questions about whether the Commission would address those kinds of complaints and how, and then that sort of sparked a policy discussion in the committee to look at the matter of the current policy, the current law, and try to identify any alternatives for maybe spelling that out or addressing a different sort of policy than what's in the current policies. So in any event, the committee identified 3 alternative options for providing some more specified detail as far as a method for handling defamation or slander-related complaints. Those 3 options, which I think were about a year ago now when they were finally put together, was one that sort of looked at the sort of detailed outline of the Commission's process and added some more into that in the written policy, and that was that the Commission assumed the responsibility to take the complaint, adjudicate it, investigate it, discover the facts, look at the applicable law, and then make a determination as to whether any unlawful kind of content on the channel was put forward. And
as you heard, a whole year has gone by. Again, the Cable Commission and various commissioners on various committees talking about all these different alternatives, trying to, again, figure out what is it that they can do that is any different than what the legal system would do if somebody had a complaint about libel or slander. And in the end, as we go to this next clip, you will see what the Cable Commission's attorney, Mr. Mike Bradley, has to say. He sums it up very cleanly, very simply, and it's very understandable.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Our recommendation has been throughout the process that the safest way for the Commission to proceed on this issue in dealing with unlawful programming and related First Amendment issues is to have the complaining party take the accused party to court.
If you don't like what somebody has said about you, take them to court, because you see, that is the proper venue. You've got a judge, you've got the proper procedures, you've got due process for both sides of the issue, rather than trying to create some other kind of system that cannot replace the legal system. So now, that was back in 2005. And there's all this talk about the community standards. And that was the first part of that workshop that Maplewood had in March of 2005, this talk about community standards and about how they just, they just feel that there needs to be community standards set for public access TV. Well, the second half of the workshop, then, they move on to that next issue as to, are they using their community access channel that they have, channel 16, are they using it as fully as they should? And are there other avenues in which they can use channel 16 and communication to the citizens through channel 16? But then this also then morphs into something different, to say that there's really so much they could do that really they're only the staff of Maplewood, and that quite frankly they need somebody else to help them get their message out. Well, that's going to take money. So let's take a look at this next clip. This is from the workshop, as I mentioned, of the Maplewood City Council of March 25th, 2013. Only a mere 8 years after the 2005 attempt to change the policies of the Cable Commission.
I don't think they have a very large staff on GTN. I think there's 3 or 4 people, and so it's probably limited to the amount of time. I don't know if, Michael, if you have any sense of how much excess time they have, because I really don't. I don't think it's a large amount.
This time that we have on 16? Is that
No, that they would have to produce, to do the film, all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
I don't off the top of my head. I do know that each time that we've met with them, they're very willing to help us. They're very more than willing, and generally, like we spoke about in the retreat, it's come to us some ideas, and we will help facilitate the technical side, the taping of it, and some of the production of it. That being said as well, I think all staff heard loud and clear from the retreat that communication and community outreach into the citizens of Maplewood is a high priority. And so we've met in staff. I know Mr. Antonin has mentioned it to staff that communication, let's use some of these avenues better. Our website, email notifications, Councilmember Cardinal had brought up, all of these things are on our radar now, whereas I think they've been bumped up in priority, if I may say so. We may still not necessarily have the resources to get to where you may want it to be, but at least we can get that information to you.
So you heard it. Communication has been bumped up the priority ladder. Now, of course, communication should have always been number one. But you'll hear how they keep referring to the retreat and talking about what happened at the recent retreat a month or so back as to the foundation for proposing their next step, when in reality, that's not entirely what happened at the retreat. But let's continue on with these workshop clips.
Chuck?
Mayor, Council, if I might just echo on what Michael just said, that discussion, we've started that, and I think two different areas. I think the Cable Commission is saying they have some more capacity for producing, but really what we need is staff, and what we heard, as Michael said it very well, loud and clear from you as a council, we need to have a communications department or a communications director or coordinator or someone on staff who starts taking the lead and coordinates that, because...
So there you heard it. So now we've come full circle. We've got our moral outrage. And we want you to satisfy our moral outrage. If you can't do that, then we're just going to have to do the job better ourselves. We're going to go and we're going to pull out, take our money, and create our own communication department, and even a department head. And where will we get the money to pay for this? Those PEG and franchise fees. Now, you see, there's a whole lot packed into that 1-hour workshop that we could probably spend hours on unpacking all the information that's been said at that workshop and compare it against other meetings and other comments in other places. But if anything can be taken away from this, you can see the way that this has been strategically positioned in order to be able to justify a potential pullout from the Cable Commission and the Joint Powers Agreement. Let's continue on and find out what else they have to say.
We all get very busy, and whether, Michael's taken the lead and done a few things on, public safety announcements for, where does the sewage go, those types of things, or his 36 project, or Gail did some on the budget. But we need to do much more of that, and so I think Karen has stepped up and volunteered to start leading that, and we need to decide from a staff standpoint, how do we do that? Where do we make that as a priority, and how best do we do it? Do we bump it up and really make it a department head level to have, quote, communications? Well, maybe we do need to add that into a department head level so that you as a council get a feeling that we're telling our story. We're the people of the city hear about things that are going on in the city, not just, watch the council meetings and you find out what's going on. No, there's a lot of other things that go on, and, how many police officers, or, your ideas about rec programs, or, Fish Creek, those types of programs, I think, are the area that we want to go. Your highlighting of it and the retreat just reaffirmed that that's where we need to go. And so I think we're in the process of kind of revamping what we do, and everybody's making it a much higher priority, shifting it around. And then, Michael Thompson can talk about public works things. Michael Folds can talk about the IT, Dewey in the parks. Everybody, we need to do that, and I think you'll see a big change 6 months from now over what we've done in the past.
So there you go. They want to have Maplewood TV according to the government. Now, in some circles, that's called propaganda. Now don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have Channel 16, because Channel 16 is the channel, the dedicated channel that Maplewood has for all of their governmental programming, whether or not it's the replay of the city council meetings, the commission, and the board meetings, but it's also the channel that they have where they can put on all these other different programs that they're talking about. But what does it really mean then that they want to put more effort into having that channel when they already have that channel? Well, you see, if they indeed do what they're thinking in the back room, which is pulling out of the Joint Powers Agreement and out of the Cable Commission, it's my understanding that if they do that, they have no obligation to keep a public access channel such as Channel 15, the Citizens Channel, alive. And that way, then they don't have to worry about public access citizen TV at all. Now, let's take a look, though, at what they did discuss at that retreat, because it certainly sounded very affirmative that the council gave direction at that retreat that they wanted the staff members to do all this communication, to use this media as the method to communicate and to do it at all costs. Well, what really came out at that retreat is that only about 55% of the households in Maplewood even have cable TV. Only 55%. So let's listen to a clip from the retreat.
Well, that sounds like about half, 55%.
You know, unless you sign up for the universal service, which isn't, there's not very many that do. There are some, but you know, so 50% of our revenue, unless we do the programming online, which is what it is. We talk about these PSAs and these short little snippets, trying to produce smaller, more specific topic segments. And so then we can, when we come into winter, we can host a 30-second video on, you know, winter parking rules to all of these different outlets. We can put it out on Scene, we can put it out on Facebook, we can put it out on Twitter, so all these different avenues, and not necessarily have it surrounded around just channel 16. We create it once, we can use it on all these different outlets, and that kind of steps away from that 30-minute, hour-long program, if you will. Not that there's, you know, that they can certainly...
Now that speaking is Michael Folds. He is our IT director in charge of the IT department at Maplewood. And for most people, they equate the IT department with the audio-visual department, the computer department, those guys who are the techie guys who know how to do all of this stuff. Well, of course, here at Public Access TV, all of us volunteers, in order to get that same level of skill and expertise, we take the little training courses here at SCC for $10 a shot, and we learn what we need to learn, and we're all volunteers. Now, of course, the IT director is indeed a department head at the City of Maplewood, and almost all the department heads that I'm aware of in the City of Maplewood make at least $90,000 a year. So, you know, we have department heads. We have a department head who is indeed the techie person for Maplewood. And he certainly sounds like he knows how to coordinate those kinds of PSAs that can be done in coordination with the GTN staff and be able to make those PSAs and then be able to use them on Facebook, on Twitter, and to do all these different kinds of things. He has that knowledge and that expertise already. Why would Maplewood need to have an additional department head to do his job? I don't see it. But let's continue on.
As well, I'm sure there's some good topics. So that as it relates to social media and even finding time within our channel, that's a priority for the council. We can certainly incorporate those more into the replays. But right now it's primarily used for replays to use.
And how would you, even we have things you could focus on, even the little websites, there are things the community centers could do more, but who's going to organize it, who's going to make sure it gets done, who's going to get the people plugged in. I mean, this is why I said to Kim, it's a wonderful thing to be there, but we can't pretend that it's just going to magically create itself.
And so we've talked about this numerous times with staff, and because we mentioned it last year at this retreat. And so all of, I think, the management team feels that it is important. And while we probably can't justify as much time to it as we'd like, it is important we need to justify time to it. And so that's why we've taken this test. Michael Thompson and the Public Works Department has done some really good ones recently. We're meeting, like I said, tomorrow morning with many of the people here to come up with, we know you can use 30, 40 of them, pick two. And let's just start somewhere and start to build this catalog that we can then use for the future.
And I would like to see the community on that because the equipment up there, and you're right, people want little pieces, and so how to get that put together and get it out there.
I think Michael's done a good job of kind of synopsis of what we as staff have talked about recently. This is evolving. I mean, just like the information. What was your comment about people getting the information from a newsletter? We talked about that, and Karen's going to take the lead on being, in effect, our editor. I mean, that's not in her job description, but she literally is going to go out and make sure that our newsletter has news about what's going on in Maplewood. I mean, what's the biggest issue that you as a council came today and asked Dave Kong to talk about? It's the murder. That's not something we normally would have put in our newsletter, but really talk about our residents, what are they asking about? And so that's really where we're evolving as staff, and what Karen, I don't know, you want to talk about some of her ideas, but she's going to, rather than go and do the don't park here, don't park there, we're going to do some information articles and make sure that our newsletter's there. But then, as Michael said, well, it's got to transition to the other 50% that might get it, information, a digital update on their smartphone, or whatever. And so it's evolving, and I think we as staff share the number one item that's really, we got to tell our story. The city's running well. Tell our story.
Do we have a Facebook page?
Absolutely.
We have a couple. Okay.
So, and I want to make sure that we have a chance to get to the last clip, but I just want to say, in listening to all this conversation, it almost sounds like Maplewood is a brand new city, that they really have never had a newsletter or a Maplewood Monthly and that they just started to have it. And so, I don't know how this can even possibly be, but let's continue on. Let's take a look at this last clip. We have only about 2 minutes left.
All right, one more thing. What do you think the theme of this day has been? What's the overriding theme? Anybody want to?
Kumbaya.
Kumbaya. Oh, man. I could.
I think what I heard a lot of in a robust discussion on communications in a whole lot of different ways. City to residents, residents to city, either staff to council, council to staff, council to council. Seems like a lot of things talking about communication.
Communication, public relations, technology using communication.
Tell the story.
Relationships, communicating with each other, communicating between staff and council, communicating with other communities, right? I think that was kind of, so you can never end up interactive if you haven't.
Public relations. You heard that very clearly. And what better way to work on your public relations than to get another department head to be in charge of your communications. So I hope you found some of this interesting, and I do believe that we all need to come together to make sure that public access is not under attack. That if Maplewood does pull out from the Cable Commission and the Joint Powers Agreement, that will have a detrimental effect on all the other communities that are part of the Joint Powers Agreement, and that's not right. Maplewood is putting themselves first rather than together we can. So with that, I want to thank you very much for watching this episode of Off the Record News. Are you concerned about peace, justice, and jobs? So am I. I'm Diana Longry, and I invite you to join me, Washington at Work,